Advanced English Masterclass will read 4 CNN and BBC news articles together. As we read the articles, you'll learn advanced English vocabulary in context. You'll learn the correct grammar and the correct pronunciation. These are advanced articles, all on the topic of your brain. If you can understand these articles, your English is excellent. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. First, I'll read the headline, How Internet Addiction May Affect Your Teen's Brain, according to a new study. Who is your teen? Or what is a teen? Who or what is a teen? And in this case, your teen. Do you know? A teenager is a person aged 13 to 19. So those are the teens. The first teen is 13, 12, 13, and the last teen is 19, 20. So this age range represents a teenager. Now you can just say age 13 to 19. This dash is verbalized as 2, 13 to 19, 2 to 19. You can also say years old, but it's not required. So it's optional. Now, teen is the shortened form of teenager and is gender neutral. So you could say my teenage daughter or my teenage son. And notice in that case, teenage is an adjective, my teenage daughter. You could also say my daughter is a teenager. It's a noun, so you need that article a. So in this article, the use of this article is speaking to a parent who has a teenage daughter or son. So by saying your teen's brain, it means your son's brain, your daughter's brain, and your son or daughter is a teenager. Now let's look at the use of how in this headline, because in this case, it is not used to ask a question. It's a statement. The question would be, how does? In the past simple, it would be how did. So how does internet addiction affect your teen's brain or affect you? And then question mark because it's a question. Now in this case, how internet addiction may affect your brain. This is common when you generally are going to provide different reasons. For example, how improving your English can help you. So this is a statement form. And then underneath, you might provide reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. So for example, you can find a better job, you can travel easily, and then you can add all the other reasons. So if you're here to improve your English and you're excited to improve your English, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. And don't worry about taking these notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue with the article. Teens, so notice here, teens is the short form for teenagers. But now they're talking about teens in general. They're not talking about your daughter or your son who is a teenager. They're talking about all teens, all teenagers. Because remember, when you add that S to a noun, you're talking about the whole group. So teens, the entire group of, the entire category of teens, teenagers who spend lots of time. This is a more casual way of saying a lot of time. So instead of saying a lot of, just saying lots, it sounds more casual, more informal. A lot of is still relatively informal. If you want to sound more formal, more academic, you could say a significant or a substantial. So significant, substantial means a large amount. But with these two, you have to use the word amount. So here you just say lots of time, a lot of time, but here a significant or a substantial amount of time. And this would sound quite formal, academic. Teens who spend lots of time on social media have complained of feeling like they can't pay attention to more important things like homework or time with loved ones. Remember, with homework, you do homework. I still hear students use the wrong verb, the wrong collocation. You do homework, which means complete. And homework is a collective noun, so you do not put an S on the noun. So you would say, I have so much homework to do. You never say it with an S. Now, instead of so much, you could also say lots of. I have lots of homework to do. You could also say a lot of. I have a lot of homework to do. You could say a significant amount of homework to do, but remember I said that sounds quite formal. That sounds almost academic. A teenager is not going to say that most likely. Let's review loved ones because this is very useful to have in your vocabulary. With loved ones, loved ones. So notice how those sounds link together. Repeat after me, loved ones. Loved ones are people you love. So remember, people is the plural of person, so it represents all the different people in your life who you love. Now, you can use a gerund statement, which is starting with your verb in ing, and you can say spending time. You spend time with people. So starting with a gerund verb, your verb in ing, this is used to make a general statement. Spending time with loved ones is the key to happiness. Key is the most important thing that results in happiness. Now, you can make loved ones possessive and say your loved ones, but that's not required. And it's common to just say spending time with loved ones. But if you want, you could say, I spent time with my loved ones, if you want. Let's continue. Almost half of teenagers, so again, the category of teenagers, people between 13 to 19, almost half, so 40%, 45%, 48%, we don't know, but it's close to half. Almost half of teenagers have said they feel addicted to social media, according to a survey this year. Now notice with according, you need this preposition, and then you have a someone, a person, according to Jessica, according to my teacher, according to a survey. So it can be someone or something like a survey, a report, a news article. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. A new study has possibly captured that objectively. So here, that, what does that represent? Has possibly captured that. That being the fact that teenagers are addicted to social media and have problems paying attention to their homework. All of what we previously discussed is summarized as that. A new study has possibly captured that objectively. Objectively means there is now facts or evidence. But notice it says possibly. Has possibly captured. Without this word, possibly, has captured, it sounds like fact, but because they add possibly, it's just a possibility. So there is also a possibility that there is no evidence, no objective evidence of this. A new study has possibly captured that objectively, finding that for teens diagnosed with internet addiction, Signaling between brain regions important for controlling attention, working memory, and more was disrupted. Okay, so finding, in this case, that is optional. It doesn't represent anything. So sometimes the word that can represent a lot of information, and other times it's literally meaningless and can be omitted. Finding for teens diagnosed. It's like when you say, I think that. There's no meaning for that. It's just a connecting word and it's optional. So finding that for teens diagnosed with internet addiction. So we're talking about teens, but specifically teens with internet addiction. Signaling. So this means when you signal in your brain, it means that you can imagine there are wires in your brain, like this image up here. So to signal is when this connection talks to this connection. So they talk to each other. They have a connection. So that would be signaling. So that's how that word is being used here. So signaling between brain regions, and then which brain regions? The ones that are for controlling attention, memory, and more was disrupted. So the signaling was disrupted, which means that your brain cells, the different regions of your brains, had a hard time, had a difficult time, or had problems communicating with each other, connecting with each other. And here, disrupted, you can think of it as negatively impacted or simply not working properly. Now, said another way, teens with internet addiction have a hard time or have a difficult time focusing. So what do you notice here? You need the verb and ing. This is a very common gerund expression that I hear a lot of mistakes with. So just remember, when you have, and then there's an adjective, hard, difficult, and then the word time. You could even use a positive adjective. We had a great time preparing for the party, for example. So it's have a adjective time. That's a gerund expression. Now you could also use have trouble, and then you use the gerund. So teens with internet addiction have trouble focusing. So both of these are very common gerund expressions that you can start using today. Let's continue. The findings are from a review. So the findings represent the information they found in the study. So the findings are from a review of 12 neuroimaging studies. So imaging means X-rays to take pictures of, and then neuro represents your brain. So pictures of your brain. Review of 12 neuroimaging studies of a few hundred adolescents. Adolescents, repeat after me, adolescents. This means young people. And here they define that for you, aged 10 to 19. Now they had to change the word from teenager to adolescent because teenager starts at 13. So from 10, 11, 12, you are not a teenager. That is not the definition. So because it started at 10, they had to use a different word choice instead of teenager, and they used adolescence. And remember, by adding the S, you mean the entire category of adolescents aged 10 to 19. And then from 2013, so this is the date range for the study. So there was an age range and a date range from 2013 to 2022. And a few hundred, we don't know how many that is. A few is more than two, because if it were two, they'd say a couple hundred. So I don't know how many it is, but I know it's 300 or more. So maybe 300 or 400, 500. That would be my guess based on what this word means. Let's continue. The behavioral addiction brought on by excessive internet use. So here, this phrasal verb, brought on, brought is the past simple of bring,
brought on by. If something is brought on by, it means that it caused it to happen. Let's review this example. The fire was brought on by old paint cans in the basement. So the fire was caused by. This is the passive form because the active form, the subject is the old paint cans. The old paint cans, where are they located? In the basement. The old paint cans caused the fire. Brought on the fire, you could say as well, using brought on in the active form. Now, in our sentence, notice that there is no verb to be. That's because it's using that information as more descriptive. So the fire brought on by old paint cans in the basement destroyed the home. So I could remove this entire part. The fire destroyed the home. But I'm giving more information. The fire brought on by old paint cans in the basement. Sometimes you see this information between two commas, which lets you know that this entire part can be removed. But if you don't see it by commas when you read it, you just have to understand where the information is. So the behavioral addiction brought on by excessive internet use caused the addiction, has become a rising source of concern. So here you could say the behavioral addiction has become a rising source of concern. And then this is just the additional information telling you where the addiction came from. What was it caused by? Has become a rising source of concern since the last decade. The authors, plural, the authors wrote in the study. Let's review this since the last decade. We use since for a starting point in time. So even though they wrote the last decade, the only way this is grammatically correct is if it represents a starting point in time. So the last decade is a period of 10 years. So 2015 to 2025, assuming the year right now is 2025. So the only way this is correct if it's since 2015, because since is only used with the starting point in time. Because of that, it would sound better to say since 2015, the actual start of the last decade, or you could say since the beginning of the last decade, because the beginning of sounds more specific. It sounds like, well, what's the beginning? It's 2020, it's 2015. That's the beginning of the last decade. So using either one of these sounds better with since, because to me, the last decade sounds more like a date range, and we only use for with ranges for the last decade, which represents 2015 to 2025. Remember, since plus specific point in time, for plus a range, a time range. Let's continue. The criteria for clinical diagnosis of internet addiction in the included studies were one's persistent preoccupation with the internet. So preoccupation with means you're distracted by, you're constantly thinking about the internet. Now, persistent is another way of saying constantly. So if it's persistent, it means it happens again and again and again and again. So it's constant. So that's one, persistent preoccupation with the internet. Withdrawal symptoms when away from the internet. A withdrawal symptom means that you either feel something physically, your hands might start to shake. For example, that could be a withdrawal symptom of someone who's trying to quit smoking. Their hands might start to shake, or it can be more emotional. You just feel really anxious or frustrated when you're away from the internet. So when you're not using the internet. And another criteria is sacrificing relationships to spend time on the internet. So sacrificing your relationship means that you're neglecting it. In order to spend time on the internet, your relationship suffers. So you're choosing the internet over your relationship. So you're sacrificing your relationship to gain time on the internet. And remember that spend time is a gerund verb. So if you had an action, you would need the verb in ing. Spend time surfing online. Now, online is the alternative to on the internet, but if you use online, just know it's one word, online. On the internet, online. So spend time surfing online, spend time watching videos online, spend time posting online. Whatever the actions are, they're in the verb ing, the gerund, because spend time is a gerund verb. But you spend time on the internet. You could also simply say spend time online instead of on the internet, because remember, online is the replacement to these three words on the internet, said one author of the study. The pattern of behavior results in significant impairment or distress in the individual's life. So the pattern of behavior, this would be spending too much time online. So the addiction to the internet. So the pattern of behavior. Spending too much time online results in significant impairment or distress in the individual's life. So distress, this represents negative emotions, and then impairment, this sounds like negative effects. So if your vision is impaired, it means you're not able to see clearly. So if your life is impaired, it means you're not able to function properly in your life. So the examples they gave of not being able to do their homework because they can't focus, that could be an example of how their life is impaired. Let's continue. When participants, so participants, these are the people who participated in the study. When participants clinically diagnosed with internet addiction, so these are participants who have an addiction to the internet and they've been clinically diagnosed. This means a doctor or a researcher has formally said, you have internet addiction. You have internet addiction. So clinically diagnosed means I didn't just say, I think I'm addicted to the internet. Someone with authority, a doctor or a researcher, said this. When participants clinically diagnosed, so formally diagnosed by an expert, clinically diagnosed with internet addiction, engage in activities governed by the brain's executive function network. Now they're going to define what the brain's executive function network is, because this is not common knowledge. I do not instantly know what this is. So what is it? It's behaviors requiring attention, planning, decision-making, and impulse control. So that is your brain's executive function network. Those brain regions showed substantial disruption. Remember previously I said substantial is a more formal way of saying a lot of. So you could say showed a lot of disruption, much disruption. Negative effects would be disruption. But substantial or significant is the more formal academic choice. Those brain regions showed substantial disruption in their ability to work together compared to those in peers without internet addiction. So all this to say, the participants, so people who have internet addiction, when they did certain behaviors. So engaged in activities governed by is a very formal way of saying did activities. So when they did activities requiring their attention, planning, decision making, or impulse control, those were the type of activities. So when someone formally diagnosed with internet addiction tried to pay attention, they had disruption in those brain regions. So they had negative effects in those brain regions compared to other people. So that's their peers, other people in the same category without internet addiction. Let's continue. The authors think such signaling changes, so remember, signaling is just how those wires in your brain connect or communicate with each other. And the changes for the people with internet addiction is those connections were impaired. They weren't working as well. They weren't working properly. The authors think such signaling changes could suggest these behaviors can become more difficult to perform, potentially influencing development and well-being. So these behaviors can become more difficult to perform. The behaviors being decision-making, paying attention, planning, controlling your impulses. So those behaviors could be more difficult because of this impairment in your brain signals because of internet addiction. And all of this might, because potentially is just the possibility. So you could replace that with the modal verb might. If you did, you would have to use the base verb might influence, because modal plus base verb might influence development and well-being, potentially influencing development and well-being. And that is the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish. And I also recommend that you read this article again because there is a lot of complicated language, but you can summarize it in an easy to understand everyday terms. So that could be a great exercise for you to read a paragraph and then try to summarize it in everyday language as if you were explaining it to a teenager. So someone who has a lower reading level. So that's a great activity to do. So now I'll read it from start to finish. How internet addiction may affect your teen's brain, according to a new study. Teens who spend lots of time on social media have complained of feeling like they can't pay attention to more important things like homework or time with loved ones. Almost half of teenagers have said they feel addicted to social media, according to a survey this year. A new study has possibly captured that objectively, finding that for teens diagnosed with internet addiction, signaling between brain regions important for controlling attention, working memory, and more was disrupted. The findings are from a review of 12 neuroimaging studies of a few hundred adolescents aged 10 to 19 from 2013 to 2022. The behavioral addiction brought on by excessive internet use has become a rising source of concern since the last decade, the authors wrote in the study. The criteria for clinical diagnosis of internet addiction in the included studies were one's persistent preoccupation with the internet, withdrawal symptoms when away from the internet, and sacrificing relationships to spend time on the internet, said one author of the study. The pattern of behavior results in significant impairment or distress in the individual's life. When participants clinically diagnosed with internet addiction engage in activities governed by the brain's executive function network, behaviors requiring attention, planning, decision-making, and impulse control, those brain regions showed substantial disruption in their ability to work together, compared to those in peers without internet addiction. The authors think such signaling changes could suggest these behaviors can become more difficult to perform, potentially influencing development and well-being.
Amazing job. Now let's move on to the next article.
First, I'll read the headline, Combat Brain Fatigue with these top expert tips. We're talking about brain fatigue, when your brain feels like this. Notice the pronunciation here, fatigue, fatigue. Repeat after me, fatigue. Fatigue means extreme tiredness. Notice it's a noun. Combat brain fatigue, it's a something. Tiredness is a something. Let's review these two sentences and see if you can identify the difference. I feel fatigue after studying English. I feel fatigued after studying English. You may notice that the pronunciation is almost identical because this D in fatigued is extremely soft and you don't really hear it at a natural pace. But what is the difference in grammar or meaning between these two? The meaning is basically identical, but fatigue here, this is a noun. You can feel something. I feel happiness when I look at a beautiful sunrise, for example. Now, I feel fatigued. This is an adjective. I feel happy when I look at a beautiful sunrise. So the meaning is the same, but the grammar is different. This is a noun and this is the adjective form, and you can feel for both of them. And notice that pronunciation is almost identical. So what about you? Do you feel fatigued, the noun, or do you feel fatigued, the adjective, after studying English? If you do, put that's me in the comments, and know that as we'll learn in this article, it's very common. So don't feel bad if you say that's me. I certainly feel fatigued after I do a lot of mental work. Now notice how they say combat brain fatigue. You could also say fight brain fatigue or battle or combat. Notice all three of these have the same visual image of fighting brain fatigue. So you have three alternatives in your vocabulary. Now let's start the article and learn how. Put your thinking cap on. Have you heard this before? Put your thinking cap on. This is an idiom and it means get ready to think hard or think creatively. So if you're discussing a problem at work or at home, someone could say, let's put our thinking caps on, because it's one's thinking cap. So if you have more than one, you would add an S to cap. Let's put our thinking caps on and figure out how to reduce the budget. For example, that's the problem you want to solve. So at the beginning of this lesson, I could say to you, put your thinking cap on. You're going to learn a lot of new vocabulary, so get ready to think hard. And don't worry if you feel fatigued by the end of this lesson as a result. Put your thinking cap on, people often hear. So this is a common expression is what they're saying. After all, that's what our brain is for. Your brain is for thinking. That's the purpose. And what many are paid to do. You are paid to think at your job. That's what you're paid to do. You're paid to think. But a new study finds that people see a downside to such mental expenditures. Thinking can be a pain. Do you know what a downside is? Put your thinking cap on. A downside is a negative aspect. It's a disadvantage. So we talk about the downsides, the disadvantages, and the opposite is the upside, or there can be plural, the upsides, the advantages, the positive aspects. So you could say there are many upsides to learning English, but I just noticed I have a typo here, but there are downsides too. I was thinking of writing, there can be downsides too, but there are downsides too. So this means there are many positive aspects to learning English, But there can be some negative aspects. For example, how much time it takes or how much mental expenditure there is. Those can be the downsides. So you can put in the comments the upside to learning English is, and then you can do the same thing with the downside is, and then you can share a point in the comments to practice this. It's very common use, the upside or the downside. Remember, it can be singular, just talking about one, or you can make it plural, the upsides and downsides. The choice is yours. So put that in the comments, an upside and a downside. Let's look at mental expenditure because I use this in my example as well as one of the downsides. Expenditures financially are things you spend money on, your monthly expenditures. So if it's a mental expenditure, it means you're spending. But what are you spending? You're not spending money, you're spending your mental effort or your mental energy. So mental expenditures is the amount of effort or energy required. Let's look at this next part. Thinking can be a pain, To describe something as a pain, it can be painful, meaning physical. I have a pain. Oh, I have a pain. This means my neck hurts. This area is painful, so it's physical. But we also use this to describe something as frustrating or annoying, and we use this a lot. For example, maybe you agree, driving during rush hour is a pain. It's annoying, it's frustrating, so it causes mental or emotional pain. Driving during rush hour is a pain. You can put that's right or that's right instead of that's me. Put that's right in the comments if you agree that this is a pain. So just remember grammatically it's to be, and then you need this article, a pain. So something, that's why we have this gerund verb. Something is your verb to be a pain. Again, if you agree that this is a pain, put that's right in the comments. Such work isn't actual pain, of course, because remember, we talked about something can be painful physically or just frustrating, annoying. So the mental expenditure, such work, the mental expenditure, isn't actual pain, of course. Your brain has no nerve ending, so your brain does not feel pain. I didn't know that. Did you know that? So a pain in the brain is not like having a pain in the neck. And that's the exact example I gave before. Oh, a pain. And it's interesting because this full expression is the idiom. So you could say driving during rush hour is a pain in the neck is the full expression to say that something is frustrating or annoying. But native speakers generally just leave out in the neck and just say a pain. So I expanded that with the full expression, but it's in brackets to show you that it's optional. And honestly, it's more common to just say a pain. But the mental effort, remember before we described this as mental expenditure. The mental effort it takes to think hard can be so upsetting that some people will choose physical pain instead. So here the article ended on instead because the alternative was already mentioned. Think hard. That's the alternative. So choose physical pain instead. But just remember, if you write out the full alternative, you have to say instead of. The preposition choice is of, and then your verb needs to be an ing. Instead of thinking, or I could add instead of thinking hard. But you don't have to because that alternative is clearly known. But I just want you to remember what preposition and the grammar that you need. A 2020 study asked people if they would prefer to do a difficult memory task, remembering if a card reappeared after a distraction. This is the difficult memory task. A distraction is something that causes you to change your focus or attention. Right now, you were focusing on this lesson, hopefully, but then if you heard a noise in the other room, you might want to go see what happened. You leave this lesson. So that noise was a distraction. It caused you to change your focus or your attention. We use this a lot in the verb form, to be distracted, to be distracted. Notice that's the passive form. So you have your verb to be that needs to be conjugated, and then distracted is always in the ed form. You could say, sorry, I was distracted. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I was distracted. And then you could add on, I was distracted by the noise. So if your friend is telling you a story, and then you realize you weren't actually focusing on your friend, you were focusing on the noise in the other room. So your friend says, so what do you think? And then you say, sorry, I was distracted. Can you say that again? Or experience searing pain. So remember, the choice was, would you prefer to do a difficult memory task or experience searing pain from a heat device held against the skin? Notice how my tone changed when I read that, because the adjective a searing pain, that sounds like an extreme pain. So if you burn your finger, if you do it just like that, it probably wouldn't be searing. But if you hold your finger on a heat source, then that would result in a searing pain, an extreme pain. Before we move on, notice they said prefer to do a difficult memory task. Verbs of preference often use the gerund, but some of them are flexible. Prefer is one of those verbs. So you can say prefer doing or prefer to do. In this case, they use prefer to do, remember, a difficult memory task, or experience searing, extreme, intense pain from a heat device held against the skin. Which would you prefer? Number one, the difficult memory task, or number two, the searing pain? Put one or two, put your choice in the comments. One or two, put it in the comments. When the pain was minor, most people chose the heat. To me, this is a slight contradiction, because the definition of searing pain is extreme or intense. So it isn't minor, because a minor pain isn't a searing pain, to be honest. When the pain was minor, more people chose the heat. But that number dropped as the pain increased. So as it moved closer to being a searing pain, more people chose the difficult memory task. However, 28% of the participants still chose physical pain over mental strain. So mental strain represents the expenditure, the effort, or the energy. Strain is also a noun, and it has the same meaning as fatigue, extreme tiredness. Personally, I hear the word strain being used most with eyes. A lot of people talk about eye strain, especially from staring at a screen all day. So you might say, my eyes become strained. So this is the adjective ed, strained, and then this is your verb. My eyes become strained at the end of the day after staring at a computer. Or you could ask, do you know how I can combat eye strain? So just as they talked about combat brain fatigue, fight against or battle brain fatigue, you can use combat eye strain or battle eye strain. You could say eye fatigue, but I hear the word strain used specifically with your eyes. Is that a problem you have from staring at a computer all day? So mental strain, mental fatigue, even when the pain was most intense. So the pain was searing, and that was 28% of participants. How can this be? How could 28% of people choose a searing pain over a mental task? After all, many do puzzles, play chess, or challenge their brains in all sorts of ways during their spare time. Notice these verbs. You do puzzles, but you play chess. So in English, you just have to memorize what verb goes with certain activities. Sometimes the choice is between do or make, but in this case, we have do or play. And of course, spare time is one's leisure time, the time they have when they're not working, they're not doing chores at home. They get to relax and perhaps play chess or do a puzzle. Yet even in those scenarios, the scenarios where people are doing puzzles or playing chess or challenging their brains in other ways. So those are the scenarios. Even in those scenarios, studies in the review found people complained about the mental effort. So if you complain about something, it means you express your negative feelings or opinions about it. I could say some students complained. So complain is a verb. In this case, it's in the past simple form because it's a completed past action. Some students complained that this lesson was too long. So you can use the verb complain plus a clause. A clause is a subject. This lesson, a verb, was, and then the rest of the sentence. A clause is a standalone sentence. So if I take this lesson was too long, that is correct as a sentence on its own. So you can use complain that and then a clause, or you can complain about, but if you use about, you need a something. Some students complained about this lesson. Now this is the actual complaint. Now notice, a complaint, this is the noun form. So if I saw this, this is a complaint. It's a noun. This lesson was too long. And then there's some sort of negative emoji because you're not satisfied or happy when you complain. And of course, it's your right to complain as a consumer, as a student, as a viewer, but I certainly hope you don't have any complaints using it as the noun. I hope you don't have any complaints about this lesson, but if you do, please share them because I will learn from them. Let's continue. To combat brain fatigue. So we understand why it's a problem. So now we're learning about the solution. Remember, you know this verb from before: to combat, to battle, to fight brain fatigue. Now notice how this sentence starts with the infinitive, to plus base verb. But this is short form for in order to. In order to. Native speakers just drop the in order and just use the infinitive. But if you see this, you know it represents in order to. In order to combat brain fatigue, and then following, you will have a clause as well. Now you know what a clause is. It's a complete sentence with the subject, a verb, and the rest of the sentence, the object. You can schedule regular breaks. So this is how you are going to combat brain fatigue. It may seem like you are interrupting your mental flow by getting up in the middle of a task, but a break, especially a physical one, such as a walk outside, refreshes and boosts brain power, experts say. Now, of course, a break is a period of rest from an activity or work. After I record this video, I am going to take a break. I'll probably make a cup of tea and then come back to work. So a quick 5-minute break to prevent eye strain, to combat eye strain and mental fatigue. So notice that verb, you take a break, meaning one, but you can take breaks, which means multiple. But the verb we use is to take a break. Now, to interrupt, you might know this, is similar to a distraction. You are interrupted by a distraction. The verb to interrupt is when you stop something, usually for a short period of time. So you're working and then A break interrupts your mental flow. It stops your mental flow for a period of time. We commonly use the verb to interrupt when someone is speaking and then someone else speaks, but then it causes this person to stop speaking. This is done in a rude way, but it can also be done in a helpful way. A speaker could be giving a presentation, but then the moderator could say, "Sorry to interrupt, but we're almost out of time. Please finish your speech." So that's commonly done in formal speeches, debates, or even in a meeting where you're following a strict agenda and you have to move on. But it's also done in a rude way. You shouldn't interrupt your teacher when she's teaching, for example. But a break, we know what that means, especially a physical one. So my example was to get a cup of tea. That's not physical. A physical one would be such as a walk outside. So that's physical, of course. It refreshes and boosts brain power, experts say. Let's practice this. When I take a break, notice this is in the present simple because when represents whenever. Whenever I take a break, when I take a break, I always is a keyword for the present simple as well. So your activity will be in the present simple. I shared mine. When I take a break, I always get a cup of tea. I could also say I always make a cup of tea or have a cup of tea. What about you? What do you do when you take a break? Put this sentence in the comments or just share your activity to practice this expression so you're more likely to remember it. Finally, so another way to combat brain fatigue, this was one way, take regular breaks, and another way, cut your brain some slack. Oh, do you know what this means? This is an idiom, to cut some slack. So remember for idioms, you have to remember the exact word. So you must use some slack. And one you can replace with whoever the something or someone is, in this case, your brain. To cut some slack. Remember that cut is an irregular verb. All forms are cut, the past and the past participle. Now this means be lenient, so be more understanding, be less critical and less judgmental. So just understand that your brain gets tired and that's okay. Cut your brain some slack rather than beating yourself up. Okay, so to physically beat someone up is to hurt them physically. But to beat yourself up is to be very critical of yourself. So students do this all the time. My English is terrible. My accent is so thick. My grammar is horrible. They beat themselves up. They're very critical of themselves, of their English skills. So that's an example of beating yourself up. But in this context, to beat yourself up, it would be, I've only been working for 2 hours. Why am I tired? I shouldn't take a break yet. It's only been 2 hours. So that would be being very critical of yourself in terms of your mental fatigue and strain. So cut your brain some slack, be lenient, understanding, rather than, notice this is a gerund expression. So you need the verb in ing after rather than. So rather than plus gerund, rather than beating yourself up, rather than being very critical of yourself because you're irritated or flustered by a complicated mental task. Recognize that those feelings are part of being human. And the lesson you should remember is you should also cut yourself some slack with your English. You don't need to beat yourself up. Remember that. Now let's look at this last word, flustered, because I really like this word. It's fun to say. Flustered. Flustered. When you're flustered, in this case, it's to be flustered. So flustered is your adjective. When you're flustered, it means that you're upset, you're annoyed, you're frustrated, but because you're either confused or you're stressed. This happens to me. I get flustered in airports. Very large airports, I find them very confusing or stressful. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I need to be. I don't know what the procedure is. So I get upset, but frustrated, annoyed. I get flustered in airports. Now, this is the passive form. You could also say, airports fluster me. So this is the active form. Airports, something to fluster, someone. Airports fluster me. What about you? Is there something that flusters you? So you could say blank flusters me. Now notice I have airports. Because it's plural, it would be they. So that's why I have fluster. But if you have one item, you could say, what could I say for one item? Maybe math. Math flusters me. So this is one item. So I add that S because it's it. It flusters me. They, airports, fluster me. So for you, thinking of the English language, you might say phrasal verbs fluster me, or idioms fluster me, or English grammar flusters me. But the lesson here is cut your brain some slack, cut yourself some slack. Don't beat yourself up. That's normal, and that's part of being human. I like this lesson at the end of this news article. So that's the end of the article. What I'll do now is I'll read it from start to finish. And this time I want you to focus on my pronunciation and shadow my pronunciation as well. Combat brain fatigue with these top expert tips. Put your thinking cap on, people often hear. After all, that's what our brain is paid for and what many are paid to do. But a new study finds that people see a downside of such mental expenditures. Thinking can be a pain. Such work isn't actual pain, of course. Your brain has no nerve endings, so a pain in the brain is not like having a pain in the neck. But the mental effort it takes to think hard can be so upsetting that some people will choose physical pain instead. A 2020 study asked people if they would prefer to do a difficult memory task, remembering if a card reappeared after a distraction, or experience searing pain from a heat device when held against the skin. When the pain was minor, more people chose the heat. But that number dropped as the pain increased. However, 28% of the participants still chose physical pain over mental strain, even when the pain was most intense. How can this be? After all, many do puzzles, play chess, or challenge their brains in all sorts of ways during their spare time. Yet even in those scenarios, studies in the review found people complained about the mental effort. To combat brain fatigue, you can schedule regular breaks. It may seem like you are interrupting your mental flow by getting up in the middle of a task, but a break, especially a physical one, such as a walk outside, refreshes and boosts brain power, experts say. Finally, cut your brain some slack. Rather than beating yourself up because you're irritated or flustered by a complicated mental task, recognize that those feelings are part of being human.
Amazing job. Now let's move on to the next article.
Our headline, levels of microplastics in human brains may be rapidly rising, study suggests. First, let's talk about microplastics, since that's the topic of this article. We have the word plastic, like a plastic bag. Micro is the prefix that means very small. So here they're talking about small plastics, but they're talking about particles, which is a small piece of a plastic bag, an extremely small, tiny. That would be microplastics. Let's talk about some alternatives to the word small. There are not many. You can say I have a small problem, I have a little problem. If you want to make it sound even smaller, you can say I have a teeny problem with the project. So you don't want to alarm anyone. You can say there's a teeny problem. It sounds smaller than small. Now we have some cutesy, these are informal words that we often use in a cute way. So imagine you're talking about a tiny baby or a tiny piece of clothing for a baby or a puppy. These would be some cute words you would use in that context, but they're generally not used in a professional context. So you could say, oh, your puppy is teeny tiny, or itty bitty. What an itty bitty sweater for a baby. Or, oh, that is the cutest teeny weeny puppy I've seen. So these are considered cutesy expressions that you can use. So levels of microplastics, extremely small, tiny plastic particles. Levels of microplastics in human brains may be. Now this is an important word choice. We have may, which is a modal, and that's why you have the base verb. Remember, modal plus base verb, not the infinitive. Maybe is only used for a possibility. So this is not a fact, this is a possibility. Now, rising, of course, means increasing, and how are these microplastics increasing, rising? Rapidly, quickly, at a fast pace. You could say my English fluency. So this represents something, the subject of the sentence. My English fluency, your verb to be, is conjugated with my English fluency, it. It is rising, increasing, rapidly, quickly. Now notice I put rapidly after the verb. Both placements are acceptable. So you can say rapidly rising or rising rapidly. Now maybe you provide the reason why and use thanks to. So thanks with an S, to, and then something. So in this case, the something is these learn English with the news lessons. My English fluency is rising rapidly. So do you agree with that these lessons are helping your level rise rapidly? If you do, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. Now let's continue with this lesson. New research uncovered an alarming accumulation. So alarming means it causes you to be concerned. It's like an alarm is going off. Alarming. And remember, if you change the word, you need to look to see if you need to change your article. So here we have and, because alarming is a vowel sound. It's not spelling, it's sound. And here we have concerning, which of course is a consonant sound. So we need a concerning. Accumulation. If something accumulates, it means it gradually, so slowly over a period of time, gathers or increases. So you can think if you start with a small snowball and then you roll it in snow, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the snow accumulates. Same with your vocabulary. You learn one phrasal verb today, another one tomorrow, another one the next day, and your vocabulary accumulates. The number of phrasal verbs in your vocabulary accumulates. So you can say my vocabulary has accumulated rapidly. Notice rapidly. Or the number of phrasal verbs in my vocabulary has accumulated rapidly. Now you could say has rapidly accumulated. You could put it there as well. Notice here, accumulate is a verb and is conjugated in the present perfect, but here it's the noun form, accumulation. It's just referring to it as a something, the accumulation of plastic particles. Remember, this is our microplastics. And in this article, specifically in human brains, that's what they're discussing. Raising concerns about their potential role. So their potential role, it means the potential role of the microplastics. That's the microplastics potential role in neurodegenerative disease. Now, neurodegenerative, this refers to your brain because neuro comes from nervous system, which includes your brain. So diseases relating to your brain, for example, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Now, this use of potential is very important because, again, just like in the headline, we have maybe rising because it's a possibility, not a fact. So the same use of potential role, they're saying it's not a fact, it's a possibility again. Microplastics are broken down from plastic waste and have polluted the entire planet. Let's review the phrasal verb broken down. And now you can say the number of phrasal verbs in my vocabulary is rapidly accumulating. So you can change this to the present continuous to show that it's in progress now. Microplastics are broken down. In this case, the phrasal verb broken down. Now notice here, it's to be broken down. So this is the adjective form because it's in the passive voice, to be broken down. This means decomposed or disintegrated. In the active form, you can say plastics take years to break down. So to decompose, to totally decompose. Microplastics are broken down from plastic waste and have polluted the entire planet from the summit of Mount Everest. So the summit is the highest point to the deepest ocean. So they're saying from top to bottom. Basically, they're trying to say the entire planet, well, which they said here, but they're trying to illustrate that in a dramatic way by having the highest point of Earth and then the lowest as well. Now notice the language that we use to show a range from something, the summit of Mount Everest, and then to something else. So you might say, I need to improve all areas of my English. And then you want to illustrate that, be more dramatic in your sentence. So you can say from something, for example, from phrasal verbs, and then to something else, to verb conjugations. You might say, I traveled all over Spain from this point to this point, and then you would have a start point and an end point. Let's continue. People consume the tiny particles. So notice, remember I said that tiny is an alternative to small, and it sounds like very small. So small, tiny. People consume. So consume means that you ingest it. Consume the tiny particles via food, water, and by breathing them in. So you can ingest something through your nose, or you can breathe it into your mouth as well. The new research published in the journal Nature Medicine. Now this is capitalized because it's the name of the journal, and we capitalize the first letter of proper nouns. So this would be considered a proper noun. The name of the journal is Nature Medicine. And it's published in, so that's the preposition here, published in the journal Nature Medicine. The new research, now I can, because we have these two commas, I can go from the subject, the new research, right to the verb, analyze, because this is additional information that doesn't affect the grammar of the sentence. So this is in the past simple, but if it were in the present simple, you would conjugate it based on the subject, the new research, it analyzed samples of brain, liver, and kidney tissues from 28 people who died in 2016 and 24 who died in 2024 in New Mexico. Let's look at the grammar here because I see a lot of mistakes with a verb and a specific past reference. You can say she has died. This is in the present perfect. So you can say she died, which is the past simple. So past simple, it's a completed past action, of course, completed past action. Or you can say she has died. This is the present perfect. When you say that, it is a completed past action, but you're emphasizing the result in the present. So you have to think of it as so now. She's died, so now we have to sell her house, for example. She has died. Now, if you include a specific past date, such as 2016 or 2 years ago, you must use the past simple because you can't use the present perfect with a specific past date. You can only use the past simple. She died in 2016. So this is a specific past action. Just to make sure this is very clear, I added unspecific time to the present perfect and completed action at a specific time in the past. That's the important thing to remember, and the past simple is required. Microplastic concentration. So when you talk about the concentration, it means the number of in a specific container. So in this case, the container is either your brain, your liver, or your kidneys. That is the area, the container, and then the number of is the concentration. Now you can have a high concentration or a low concentration. So just saying the word concentration, you do not know if it's high or low. You have to give more information. So here they give more information. Microplastic concentration was much higher. And then where? What's the container? In the brain tissue. So by saying microplastic concentration, it means the number of microplastic particles was much higher in the brain tissue. It was also higher in brain and liver samples from 2024 compared with those from 2026. Now remember in English that one word can have different meanings. You're probably familiar with the word concentration when it comes to mental focus. Concentration is important when you're studying. So that's your focus on one specific thing. Concentration. That's the noun form. So it starts the sentence to make a general statement. Concentration is important when you're studying. Do you agree with that? Now you might also say, I need to concentrate. So maybe you tell your husband, your kids, your coworkers, or your friends, don't bother me. I need to concentrate. I need to put all of my focus on one thing because I need to rapidly improve my English fluency. So maybe that is the use of concentrate, the verb, and concentration, the noun that you are familiar with. In this case, the noun means the number of. Let's continue. The scientists extended the analysis with brain tissue samples from people who had died between 1997 and 2013 on the US East Coast. Let's talk about extended. If you extend something, it means you increase the length in terms of a timeline or a deadline. You extend it, you increase the length, or you can increase the scope. Do you know what scope means? Scope means if the study or the original study was 20 people, and then the new study is 100 people. So they extended the scope to include more people, more things, more analysis. So the scope is how many different aspects. So the scientists extended the analysis. So using extend, maybe you have used this to say, can you extend the deadline? Maybe you've asked your professor, your teacher, or your boss, client, can you extend the deadline? So if it is due this week, you're asking for it to be extended maybe until next week, or even 1 day, 1 hour would still be extending the deadline, increasing the length. Now, this is the verb extend. You can also use the noun form extension, extension, and you need the article and extension. So can you give me an extension? So you're asking for the person to extend the deadline. You're just using the noun form, which is very common, which is why I'm explaining it. Can you give me an extension? Now, if it's obvious you're talking about the deadline, you don't need to include the noun. But if it's not, then include the noun, the deadline, and include the preposition on. Can you give me an extension on the deadline? So it means the same thing. The scientists extended the analysis with brain tissue samples from people who had died between 1997 and 2013. So on the coast. And then which coast? The US coast. Which US coast? The US East Coast. So that's giving more information, but the preposition is on with coast. On the coast. Let's continue. The data showed an increasing trend in microplastic contamination of brains from 1997 to 2024. So an increasing trend, it means if this is 1997 and 2024, so it is just gradually going up, and that would be the trend. But it didn't say rapidly increasing. So if it was rapid, the line would be like this, but maybe it's just more of a gradual. We don't know because it didn't say. But an increasing trend in microplastic contamination of brains from 1997. So here again, we have that range from to, and then you can have two dates as well, from 1997 to 2024. Now, it's very common to talk about trends. Think of the trends with AI and automation right now. And increasing just shows the pattern of growth over time. So it's very common to describe it as increasing. Now, let's review the grammar here. There is an increasing trend. Now, in English, this is my subject. So you could say in education, in data management, in marketing. So whatever the topic is, there's an increasing trend in English, in the English language. Now I'm using the preposition towards, because that is where the English language is going. It's the direction towards. Now, because towards is a preposition, if you used a verb, it would be the gerund, but you can also use a noun. So I could say towards casual speech, and then I gave an example like phrasal verbs, or towards using casual speech like phrasal verbs. So this is a great phrase to have in your vocabulary. And remember, you can change the topic, and then of course you would change what the trend is. Let's continue. The most common plastic found was polyethylene, which is used in plastic bags and food and drink packaging. It made up 75% of the total plastic on average. So do you know this phrasal verb, to make up? Synonyms are represent, but you need to match the grammar. So this is in the past simple, it represented, or you could say accounted for. So if you use accounted, you need the additional preposition for. It accounted for 75%. So you have your whole, and then 75% of that, which I can't show you, would be plastics. So 25% represents other things. So you can say phrasal verbs make up. So this is your phrasal verb, to make up, which is funny because my sentence is phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs make up, represent a large part of natives' daily speech. I have this apostrophe here because natives is plural, but then I want to show possession. I want to show that the daily speech belongs to the natives. So I put this apostrophe after when the noun is plural. Let's continue. These findings suggest that environmental micro and nanoplastics levels are rising and may make their way into human organs at increasing rates. Now, before you get too alarmed, remember we used alarming as an adjective, an alarming rate, a concerning rate. Before you get alarmed, concerned, just remember they used this modal verb may, which is very important because they're not saying this is a fact, it's a possibility. And just by seeing this word may, we don't know. It could be a 30% chance. It could be an 80% chance. It isn't clear. You would need more information. As an example, you might tell your friend or coworker or boss, don't be alarmed. So here, alarmed is an adjective form. It describes the state, which is why you're using the verb to be, and you're using this in the imperative. You're giving an instruction. Don't be alarmed. So to be alarmed, this would mean to be worried or anxious. Now with these two adjectives, you can use be or feel. Don't feel worried, feel anxious. But with alarmed, you would have to say don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed. I only said that I may move abroad. So adding that word may, again, remember, is possibility, not fact. And you have modal plus base verb. May is a modal. I only said that I may move abroad. I'm still on the fence. Do you know what this means? I'm still on the fence. If you're on the fence, it means you're still deciding. You haven't decided. I'm on the fence. And even the word choice here suggests, this is also used for probability. It's not used for fact. If the word choice was these findings prove or these findings demonstrate, those would be more factual word choices, but suggest means that is just presented as a possibility. Let's continue. While the study uncovered an association between plastic accumulation, so now you know what this means, and what is the grammar here? It's the noun form. The verb is to accumulate, so to gradually increase or gather, and it's the noun form, plastic accumulation, and certain health conditions. Okay, so there's an association. It means that, so a certain health condition, remember they're talking about neurodegenerative disease, so let's say Parkinson's is a certain health condition, and then someone's brain with Parkinson's also had microplastics. So that would be an association. You can think of association as a connection or a link. So it's saying that right now the study uncovered. Uncovered is another way of saying revealed or showed. But this use of while is important because even though I haven't read the rest, I know that while is used to introduce a contrast. So right now, yes, they are talking about this connection, this association, but I know there's going to be a contrast. So before we explain everything, let's review this contrast. Larger and more diverse studies are needed to confirm long-term trends and potential health risks. So they're basically saying that yes, there is an association, but more research is needed before we can say that there is proof or a link between these two. Let's review this together. So while this introduces a contrast, so I have this one point which may sound positive or negative, but even before I read any more, I know the next point is going to be a contrast. So if this point is negative, which it was, this association, which is another word for connection or link, that's negative, but I'm not alarmed because I know there's going to be a contrast. So something that sounds more positive. So more studies are needed to confirm, which is another way of to show proof or evidence of, because remember the language was just a possibility, suggest, may, those are words of possibility. So now we need to confirm, we need proof or evidence, which we do not have right now. So while the study, instead of while, you could say although or though. Those are synonyms. While the study uncovered, so this means revealed. It can also mean showed, but if it means showed, it showed for the first time. So something that was not shown before. That's how you would use uncover. So the study uncovered an association, connection, or link. And that's the end of the article. And that's why I said, don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed because more research is needed. So now what I'll do is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Levels of microplastics in human brains may be rapidly rising, study suggests. New research uncovered an alarming accumulation of plastic particles in human brains, raising concerns about their potential role in neurodegenerative disease. Microplastics are broken down from plastic waste and have polluted the entire planet, from the summit of Mount Everest to the deepest oceans. People consume the tiny particles via food, water, and by breathing them in. The new research, published in the journal Nature Medicine, analyzed samples of brain, liver, and kidney tissues from 28 people who died in 2016 and 24 who died in 2024 in New Mexico. Microplastic concentration was much higher in the brain tissue. It was also higher in brain and liver samples from 2024 compared with those from 2016. The scientists extended the analysis with brain tissue samples from people who had died between 1997 and 2013 on the U.S. East Coast. The data showed an increasing trend in microplastic contamination of brains from 1997 to 2024. The most common plastic found was polyethylene, which is used in plastic bags and food and drink packaging. It made up 75% of the total plastic on average. These findings suggest that environmental micro and nanoplastics levels are rising and may make their way into human organs at increasing rates. While the study uncovered an association between plastic accumulation and certain health conditions, larger and more diverse studies are needed to confirm long-term trends and potential health risks.
Amazing job. Now let's move on to the next article.
Our headline, Amazing Reduction in Alzheimer's Risk Verified by Blood Markers, study says. First, let's talk about the pronunciation of this word, Alzheimer's. So notice this beginning is pronounced like the name Al. Now this is pronounced as an S, Psi. And this H is not heard, Alzheimer's. Now it has this apostrophe S, it's showing possession because it's Alzheimer's disease. But often they don't say disease, but you still keep the apostrophe S and it's just implied that it's disease. Now let's look at this structure. Reduction, this is a noun, it's a something. So notice you have reduction in something. Maybe your teacher says to you, I've noticed a reduction. So this is a noun. That's why you need an article here. I've noticed a reduction in your mistakes. Great job. Now let's review this sentence. I've noticed a reduced number of mistakes, and then potentially in your writing, in your speech, in your presentation. And again, great job. So notice here, a number of, that's the noun phrase, and you use of in this case, of mistakes. Reduced functions as an adjective and it tells you more information about the number. I'm sharing this because it's very common to use reduced risk of something. For example, a healthy diet could reduce. So here reduce is a verb. Could is a modal. It means there's a possibility, but it isn't guaranteed. Now for sentence structure, you have modal plus base verb. So that's why we have reduce. A healthy diet could reduce your risk of Alzheimer's. So notice those preposition changes and sentence structure changes. In this case, reduction again is a noun. Amazing reduction in Alzheimer's risk. Now, amazing, this is in quotations because it means someone directly said that. So in this case, this is what the study said. So in the study, they used the word amazing. And of course, amazing is a very positive adjective. Very, very, very good or great. You can say amazing. So hopefully you're thinking learning English with the news is, and here are some alternatives that also mean very, very, very good. Incredible, remarkable, extraordinary, or amazing. So if you agree with that, put amazing in the comments so I know you enjoy this lesson. And don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Let's keep reading. When Penny Ashford's father was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's disease, so here notice they added disease. You could just say early stage Alzheimer's, but you would still keep that apostrophe S to show possession even if you don't have the word disease. And notice you're diagnosed with something, and it's to be diagnosed with something. So her father was diagnosed because it's the simple past, it's a completed past action, was diagnosed with something, with Alzheimer's. And then early stage is an adjective. It tells you the severity of the degree. Severity represents how severe. So we could have on a scale of 0 to 10, and then 0 would be the least severe, and then 10 would be the most severe. And then this scale is severity. How severe is the illness or the disease? As a question, you could ask someone, how severe is the illness? So severe is an adjective. Or you could ask, what's the severity of the illness? And severity is a noun. This is probably the most common in an everyday context. And then this is more of a technical term. Like I said, you might be trying to understand on a scale the severity of it. When Penny Ashford's father, so again, this possessive here, this apostrophe S, is because the father belongs to Penny. Now, Penny, this is a female name, so you would say her father. When her father was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's disease at age 62. So at age and then 62. Notice the sentence structure here. You could also say at 62 or at 62 years old. You could use years old if you did not use the word age. This is a more formal way of using it at age 62. I wrote those two options for you. Now you can also use the more standard term, which is when he was 62. Now you can just use the number. If you want, you can say 62 years old, but you can't just say 62 years. You must use years old. And notice there's an S because it's plural. So when he was 62. At age 62, this sounds the most formal. Let's keep going. She knew the devastating brain disorder might one day steal her memory. Now notice here, this might, one day is a time reference, and the next verb is steal. So might is our modal verb of possibility, and steal is our main verb. It's in the base verb because modal plus base verb. Now, one day is suggesting that it's unknown, and it's unknown if it will happen, or it's unknown when it will happen. So it adds more possibility or mystery to it. So here's a medical vocabulary question for you. Her father has the disease. She's worried that she might get the disease. That means the disease is, do you know what the word is? If the disease is passed from father to daughter or mother to son, from parent to child, the disease is called hereditary. Is that what you said? Hereditary. So that means it's genetic. It's in your genes because the child gets the genes of the parent. Hereditary. Let's review this sentence. At age 43. So notice I'm using this at the very beginning. as a phrase to introduce it. So you can do that as well. This at age 62 or any of the options I gave you, you can have this at the very beginning as a phrase. At age 43, she was diagnosed. So the verb to be, of course, in the past simple, she was diagnosed with a disease. And then you can use hereditary. Notice that H is pronounced H. Hereditary, hereditary. This is an adjective with a hereditary disease. So this isn't the name of a disease. It indicates how you get the disease. So it means a disease that you inherited from your parents genetically. This is just an example. It's not related to the story. Let's keep going. In her late 50s, so we're talking about Penny Ashford. Her father was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's. She's concerned she might get Alzheimer's because it's hereditary, which is implied by this article. In her late 50s. Notice this. If you did not have this word, in her 50s, it means Penny could be 50 or 59 or any number in between in her 50s. So the decade of 50s, from 50 to 59. But late 50s, to me, sounds like 57, 58, 59. That sounds like late 50s. Now, we have two other names, two other adjectives to describe this category. Do you know what they are? There's early, mid, and late. Early 50s, of course, is 50, 51, 52, 53. Mid 50s, 54, 55, 56, and then late 50s. So this is a way of giving someone an approximation of how old you are without specifically stating the exact age. In her late 50s, her free-floating anxiety turned into outright panic when she began struggling to find words. Let's review these adjectives here. We have free-floating anxiety. So what is free-floating? Well, if you have a speech that you're giving tomorrow and you feel anxious, anxiety, that is not free-floating because you know the cause. You're anxious because you're giving a speech tomorrow. If you don't have a speech tomorrow, you have nothing on the calendar, is just a regular Sunday day is a regular Sunday, and you have nothing specific to cause you concern, but you still feel anxiety, that's free floating. So it's a general feeling. It's not caused by something specific. So you can't identify why you feel anxious. So her free floating anxiety turned into, this is the phrasal verb form of became outright panic. So outright represents full, complete. So complete panic, full panic. And panic is a very intense feeling, more intense than anxiety. And then this is the cause, when she began struggling to find words.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
Remember, her anxiety became panic, full, complete panic, outright panic, when she began struggling to find words. I couldn't tell a story. I couldn't get my words out, said Ashford, now 61. So remember, she was in her late 50s. now 61. This is a specific number, obviously. You could also say now in her early 60s. But if you use that, notice the additional preposition in, and then the decade belongs to the person. So the possessive pronoun. Now in her early 60s. That's what 61 is, early 60s. Let's keep going. I remember sitting at a dinner party one time and I couldn't finish my thoughts. Notice here we have one time. But where are we on a timeline? Are we past, present, or future? We're in the past. So one time is an unspecific time reference for the past. And previously we learned that one day is an unspecific time reference for the future. You've probably said, I want to speak confidently one day, an unspecific time in the future. Of course, you want that sooner rather than later, which is why I'm here to help. Let's review this again. I remember sitting. Notice here we have the gerund verb. When you're thinking about something in the past, we use remember plus gerund. I remember being a student. I remember talking to my mom about that problem. I remember creating that lesson for my students. But remember plus infinitive, that's for the future. It's giving someone an instruction to do. Remember to like this lesson. Remember to subscribe. So you haven't done it yet, I'm assuming. So that's an instruction for the present, near present, or the future. But for the past, we use the gerund verb. I remember sitting at a dinner party one time and I couldn't finish my thoughts. So couldn't, this is the modal verb can in the past. I can do that. I couldn't do that yesterday. I can do that now. I can do that tomorrow. I couldn't do that yesterday. So can for the present or future, couldn't for the past. I couldn't finish my thoughts at that unspecified time in the past. It was the most unbelievable moment. I came home and sobbed. What does this mean? I came home and sobbed. To sob is to cry uncontrollably, to cry very hard. So to have a lot of tears and for them to come down very quickly. So the verb is to sob. And then, of course, this is in the past simple. I came home and sobbed and told my husband, something is wrong with me. Now, notice here, this is in quotation marks as well. The story is in the past, but when she said this, she was saying it in the moment. So that's why it's in the present simple. Something is wrong with me. I can't talk, she said. I was petrified. I was petrified. So she's thinking about this time at the past when she couldn't finish her thoughts. She was petrified. Do you know what petrified means? It means extremely scared. Let's keep going. Today, after a complete revamp of her lifestyle and overall health, Ashford's struggles with retrieving words have eased. Notice here we have Ashford's struggles. So struggles is a noun and they belong, the struggles, they belong to her. Her last name is Ashford. That's why we have this possessive here. Ashford's struggles, her struggles. Now you can use with and then a gerund verb because with is a preposition. If you write this as a normal clause, subject, verb, object, then you would say Ashford struggles to retrieve words. So struggle is a regular verb, an infinitive follows it. But this is the noun form, and you use with and then a gerund. And her struggles have eased. This means the severity. Remember, we talked about the word severity, how severe something is, the severity. The severity has gone down. So have eased. To ease, it's gone down, or it's lessened. It's become less bad. Have eased. Now let's go back, because you might be wondering about this word. After a complete revamp of her lifestyle and overall health. So she revamped this area, her lifestyle, and this area as well, her overall health. It means that she completely changed them with the goal of improving them. This word is commonly used in a variety of contexts. So the verb is revamp. You might say, I need to revamp my website. So you completely change the layout, the design, the colors, the photos. And of course, your goal is improving the website by doing that. I need to revamp my website. Maybe it's your schedule when you do things because you have no time to study English. So you need to revamp your schedule. Or your wardrobe. Your wardrobe represents all the clothes available to you. So everything in your closet or drawers, that's your wardrobe. So you throw out all your clothes, you donate them, and then you get new clothes, you revamp your wardrobe. So let's read this again. Today, after a complete revamp of her lifestyle and overall health, Ashford's struggles with retrieving words have eased, while measures of amyloid and tau proteins, I don't know what these are, to be honest with you. They're proteins. They're the name of specific proteins, but the average native speaker would not know what these are. A medical professional would know what they are. So there's no need for you to know what these are unless you are studying to become a medical professional. But protein, that's an important word that the general public would know. While measures of amyloid and tau proteins and neuroinflammation, I only have a general idea of what this is as a person with a non-medical background. Inflammation, and then, well, what type of inflammation? Neuro. So neuro represents having to do with your brain, your neurology. So neuroinflammation. So inflammation represents swelling and areas that are affected. And neuroinflammation, all hallmark signs of Alzheimer's. So they're telling us why they identified these specific proteins and this word, neuroinflammation, because they're hallmark signs of Alzheimer's. So here the word hallmark would represent the defining signs, the most important signs. So if you have these proteins in your body, then you probably have a higher risk of Alzheimer's because they're hallmark signs. So defining or determining signs. And in her case, they have fallen. So of course, there's a reduction. Ashford knows about these improvements because she's part of a unique study tracking her progress via key blood biomarkers now being used to help diagnose early dementia. So notice here we have unique, and then we have this article. Now you've learned that you change your article or an depending on the beginning of the next word. And what's the rule? It's a vowel, right? But it's a vowel sound. So it's not in spelling, it's in pronunciation. Most of the time, the vowel spelling does match the article, but this is pronounced as you. So it's actually a consonant sound. And that's why we have a unique. And it's easier to say a unique than an unique. Your mouth has more difficulty with an unique. And that's the only reason why we change it between a and an, is to make pronunciation easier. And it's easier to say a unique, a unique. Notice you use a little bit of a y glide, a unique study, a unique study. And also notice here, we have the word diagnose, but it's being used as the active verb form. So to be diagnosed with, you're receiving the diagnosis. Diagnosis is the noun form. To be diagnosed with, you're receiving it. Your main verb in that case is the verb to be. Diagnosed is always in the third form, but this is the active form of the verb, to diagnose, to diagnose. So let's review this together. The doctor diagnoses the patient. So this is the active form of the verb to diagnose. The doctor diagnoses the patients. The doctor shares his diagnosis or her diagnosis. So in this case, diagnosis is a noun and it belongs to the doctor. The patients are diagnosed with an illness by the doctor. And this is the passive form. So the verb is to be, that's what you need to conjugate. And in this case, diagnose is the verb that you conjugate. Let's continue. Instead of relying on painful spinal taps and expensive brain scans, these blood tests, so remember it was the blood tests here in this unique study, these blood tests are heralded as a new, less invasive and time-consuming way to determine risk and aid in an earlier diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So notice here, diagnosis and diagnosis. So diagnosis is the noun form, like we saw here, diagnosis. Diagnosis of an illness, diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Now, if something is heralded as something else, it means that it's publicly praised as something. So for sentence structure, you would have something that's being publicly praised. Let's use ChatGPT. In this article, it was these blood tests. So that's why we have are, because your verb to be needs to, of course, match the subject. So in our article, it's plural. In my example, it's singular. ChatGPT is heralded. So we always use this in the third form of the verb, heralded as. You need that preposition as, but now we need a noun. So here I have a tool for learning languages, but I want to make it sound more impressive. So I added this adjective, a groundbreaking tool for learning languages. So publicly praised. Let's continue. The preliminary data. So the preliminary data, it's the data that's first available. So it's not all data, it's just the first available, first analyzed, the first data. The preliminary data presented Monday at the American Academy of Neurology annual meeting in San Diego analyzed biomarkers on 54 participants in an ongoing preventative neurology study. So ongoing means that it doesn't have a definitive end date. It's ongoing. Now, I think this is the second time we saw the word biomarker here, just in the plural, and we didn't discuss it before. So a biomarker, my understanding, my non-medical background understanding is a biomarker is something in our body, so our blood, our protein, something in our body that you can look at to identify certain things, such as the presence or absence of disease or other markers, which would represent categories for your health or wellness. So that's my very basic, non-technical understanding of it. If you have a medical background and you want to share a more advanced understanding, feel free. Alzheimer's blood tests are the key to widespread prevention of dementia, experts say. So the key, the most important, so are critical, are crucial, are the most important to widespread prevention. Let's keep going. If people can be diagnosed, so the people are receiving, right? So that's why it's in the passive. If people can be diagnosed in their doctor's office. So said another way, it'd be if the doctor can diagnose people in their office, the office now belonging to the doctor, in their office. So if people can be diagnosed in their doctor's office, they can more immediately move into preventative care and implement lifestyle changes designed to slow the progression of their disease. So what I did here is an excellent exercise that you can do to really push yourself, to force you to use different forms, different grammatical structures of one word. So take one word and see how you can change it. That really shows your level of fluency and how well you truly understand the language. So this is a great exercise. So everything I highlighted, you can change it to the active form and say, if doctors, this apostrophe is in the wrong place because right now this is one doctor. Now, if that's true, then I need an article because a singular noun like doctor would require an article. But this wouldn't make sense because what belongs to the doctor? So there's no reason for the possessive to be here, okay? So we just want if doctor. So when you have the plural noun, you don't need an article. My mind got confused because it saw doctors here. So that's why I wrote it. If doctors can diagnose, so this is your verb to diagnose, we have our modal, and then remember modal plus base verb. Now you can say patients or you can say people. Notice people does not have an S because people is the plural form of person. One person, two people. Patients just represents people who see that doctor, and then people are just more random. If doctors can diagnose patients, people in their office, and then everything else is the same. They can more immediately move into preventative care. Now here, if you implement, which simply means you apply lifestyle changes in your life. If you implement lifestyle changes, you might say if you revamp your lifestyle and revamp their lifestyle. So that's another great way to see how advanced your abilities are, because if you can take a word that you learned in this article and you can replace it and know what else you need to do to replace it, because I can't just say revamp lifestyle changes. That's not correct. It would be and revamp their lifestyle. So now let's read that. They can more immediately move into preventative care and revamp their lifestyle to slow the progression of their disease. So this word would have to be replaced as well. It doesn't belong if I wanted to use revamp their lifestyle. Now my next word would be to slow, because this provides the reason why. Why are they revamping their lifestyle? They're doing it in order to slow, but this just represents in order to. And revamp their lifestyle to slow the progression of their disease. So if you can do the two things that I just did in this in this paragraph, then wow, you have a very advanced understanding of the words you learn and overall English grammar and sentence structure. So try it. Try it with an easy example. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish and you can focus on my pronunciation. Amazing reduction in Alzheimer's risk verified by blood markers, study says. When Penny Ashford's father was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease at age 62, she knew the devastating brain disorder might one day steal her memory. In her late 50s, her free-floating anxiety turned into outright panic when she began struggling to find words. I couldn't tell a story, I couldn't get my words out, said Ashford, now 61. I remember sitting at a dinner party one time and I couldn't finish my thoughts. It was the most unbelievable moment. I came home and sobbed and told my husband, something is wrong with me. I can't talk. She said, I was petrified. Today, after a complete revamp of her lifestyle and overall health, Ashford's struggles with retrieving words have eased, while measures of amyloid and tau proteins and neuroinflammation, all hallmark signs of Alzheimer's, have fallen. Ashford knows about these improvements because she's part of a unique study tracking her progress via key blood biomarkers now being used to help diagnose early dementia. Instead of relying on painful spinal taps and expensive brain scans, these blood tests are heralded as a new, less invasive and time-consuming way to determine risk and aid in an earlier diagnosis of Alzheimer's. The preliminary data presented Monday at the American Academy of Neurology annual meeting in San Diego analyzed biomarkers on 54 participants in an ongoing preventative neurology study. Alzheimer's blood tests are the key to widespread prevention of dementia, experts say. If people can be diagnosed in their doctor's office, they can more immediately move into preventative care and implement lifestyle changes designed to slow the progression of their disease.
Amazing job with this lesson. Now, do you want me to keep making these lessons for you? If you do, put let's go, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.